Great, thank you. So if you saw the sermon title, it's Outsmarted. And this is something that I've always appreciated. I wasn't a very big kid, and so my goal, of course, was to outsmart people if there was a scruff or something like that. I only had one fight in my entire life, actually. I was swinging on a swing, and someone rolled a kickball to me, and I kicked it, and it hit a kid in the head, and he was bigger than me. And so by outsmarting, I just put him in a headlock and just held on until the teacher showed up. And then, of course, we were laughing on the way to the principal's office and having a good time. But outsmarted, I think a lot of us can relate. You know, there's a lot of things in the world that are bigger, more powerful, more money, more education, whatever it is. And so a lot of times we feel that we need some upper hand to get ahead, and outsmarted is the way. If you notice, there's some kind of light that's hitting it, kind of washing out the picture just a little bit. I appreciated this. The pictures do come from AI. The sermon is my head. But you can see, I appreciated this. It proposed that the devil is aging and is checkmate. And I appreciate that. He is defeated, but he is fighting hard to take as many captives as he can before time is up. I wanted to first look at a couple stories. These are not real stories, but I think this concept of outsmarting the more powerful individual has been a theme throughout all human history. There was a story of the Sphinx. Men would be on the road to Thebes, down in Luxor, the Valley of the Kings, there in Egypt. This is out southeast of Cairo. You go down there and there's lots of archaeology, and the pyramids are still north of there. But there was a story that this Sphinx was on the road when men would travel down to Thebes, and he had a riddle. And some of you may know the story, but the riddle was, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 3 legs in the afternoon, 2 legs in the afternoon and 3 legs at night. And if you couldn't guess the riddle, the Sphinx would eat you. And so this man, Oedipus, came along one day and he solved the riddle. I'm not going to tell you in case you want to have some time to think on it, but he solved the riddle, and the Sphinx jumped off a cliff and killed herself. And there's a story, this is also a made-up story, but another very interesting story. Scheherazade, I can't remember her name, how to pronounce it, but there was this king, Shahryar, and he first married a wife, and she was unfaithful to him, so he had her killed. And then what he would do is he would marry a girl every day and have their marriage ceremony, and then kill her the next morning, so that she could never betray him. And this woman was smart, and she wanted to put an end to this reign of terror, and so she voluntarily married this king. And what she did was, in the evening time, she would tell him stories, and she would always leave a cliffhanger right at the end of the story. And he'd say, well, what happened? She says, well, let's talk about it tomorrow night. And so this story is 1001 Nights is the name of this story. And so for 1001 nights, she would constantly tell these stories and leave a cliffhanger to spare her life another day. But not only that, but she told stories that started to transform the king, to take away his lack of trust and his revengeful spirit until he became a new man. So it's a very wise woman. And so I love this concept of outsmarting people that maybe are run by emotion, violence, greed, whatever their emotions are. And it takes somebody to come along with a cool mind and a plan for redemption to draw them into a better life. You may be familiar with the picture of what this story represents, and you can speak out. Solomon, right? There was two women, and they were arguing over whose child. Well, the two women had their children around the same time, and one woke up and their child was dead, and the other woman woke up and the child was alive, and the woman whose child died switched them, and so there was this problem: whose child is this? And they brought it to King Solomon, and his solution was, cut the child in half, and you can each have a half. To which the true mother said, please let her have the child. That revealed the true mother, of course, was the one that would give up their child to spirit's life. And so that was a wonderful sign of this wisdom. And this one here was also an interesting way of outsmarting. Remember, David was running from King Saul for his life. King Saul wanted to kill him. And when King Saul and his soldiers were in a cave, David went and cut off a little piece of his garment and stole his water. And then when Saul went out with the soldiers, David came out and said, Saul, look, I could have taken your life. Please, can we end this reign of terror? Again, outsmarting him. Unfortunately, Saul was insane. Who is this young man? Jesus. And where is he? In the temple. And what's he doing? Teach? Well, yes, but how was he teaching? With questions, exactly. And I love this concept. You don't, in order to get somebody to believe differently, you don't necessarily have to speak directly to them. A lot of people resist that type of education. But if you can ask questions and lead them to proper conclusions, this is a beautiful thing. And I particularly like to do this. If someone has a wrong concept, you ask questions that make what they believe so silly looking that they get confused. Like, did I really just say I believe that? That's what you said if you draw what you said to the ultimate conclusion. And so now they have to rethink what they believe and then reformulate their ideas and go down a different road. And that's what Jesus did at age 12. When the priests and the Pharisees were around him and they were like, we're going to get this kid to, believe the right thing. But all he did was started asking questions. Well, if you say that, then what about this? And if that, what about that? And they marveled at the wisdom that he possessed at age 12. Later on in Jesus' life, he was still outsmarting them. Remember, the woman was caught in adultery, and they bring the woman out. Now, of course, they set the whole thing up, but they bring the woman out, and they say, what should we do? Moses said that we should stone this woman, but what do you say? Now, if Jesus says stone her, he doesn't have the authority to do that because they're under Roman occupation. But if he says no, then they show that he doesn't respect the law of Moses. So he's in a pickle. What does he do? Stoops down on the ground, writes in the dust, and he gets up and he says, he that is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone. Nobody can answer a question. So again, he outsmarts them. And this is a wonderful one when they come to Jesus and they say, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And of course, Jesus realizes if I say don't pay taxes, then again I'm in violation of the Roman law. But if I say pay taxes, then all the Jews are going to hate me because they hate this occupation. So again, they were trying to catch him and make one side or the other hate him because he was becoming so popular. Hordes of people were going to see this man that could heal, that just love flowed out from him. And so he picked up the coin. Well, he told them, what is written on the coin? And it says, Caesar was on there. He says, well, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God's what is God's. So again, confounding these people that were trying to trap him. So, I want to turn our attention a little bit to the Sermon on the Mount, My wife and I have been going through the book of Matthew, and when we got to this verse in Matthew chapter 5, if you want to turn there, you can read it. But basically, Jesus says, you heard in old times, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But I tell you, don't resist the evil person. Now, what's interesting is, and I don't think a lot of people realize this was a blessing. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And let me give you an example. I remember years ago, I don't know, I was probably 14, 13, and a friend and I had BB guns, and we went up in the woods, and we were probably going to try to shoot something. I don't think we did. The only thing I shot was my friend. He was sitting on a log, and I can't remember. Either I said, no, it's only one pump, it's not going to hurt, or it's not loaded. And I shot, and it hurt. Now, in many cases, what would he want to do? Take the gun, probably shoot me in the head. But he was only allowed to shoot me in the leg, right? Because eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And a lot of times, because we're human and we have this emotion and this revenge comes out, this is to actually prevent seeking revenge beyond what happened to us. So people don't normally think of it that way, that this was a law to protect people from overreaching. So for example, if somebody drove through your yard and ripped up your lawn, you may want to sue them and just really go to town. I need $20,000, $50,000, whatever it is. My wife has got PTSD now because the car, people make up all these stories to make their claims bigger and bigger and bigger, right, Rudy? Yeah, and he's a lawyer, retired, so he knows. But this was to say, no, if they drove through your lawn, we just get, a turf consultant here, and we'll get the numbers, and they'll pay for the damage that they did. So very interesting. And a lot of people don't realize that. We think about this revenge, and that's really what we contemplate. I'm glad when I shot him in the leg that he didn't have the right to do something more than that. And you may think of a story in your life where you've done something, injury has been caused or whatever, and you could have gotten into a lot more trouble than you did, because this is justice, right? This is justice. And this is one thing. How can people think that God will burn people forever for maybe stealing a pack of gum? It's ludicrous that people can have that concept of God. This is what Jesus teaches. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, one for one. I asked someone a while back on this concept of people burning forever in hell. I said, so he believes, he's in a denomination where if you don't get baptized, you're lost. And I said, okay, so if you are on your way to your son's baptism and you get in a car accident, what happens to your son? And he says, I hope you're right. Because his belief was his son would burn in hell forever on his way to his baptism. It's just ludicrous that people could think that way about God. So we were in Matthew, my wife and I, and we went to the next story, or the next illustration that Jesus gives. If somebody hits you on your right cheek, turn to him. Some Bibles say the other. Some Bibles don't specify which cheek at all, but the King James Version specifies if they hit you on the right cheek, turn to them the other. Well, what does that mean? I started thinking about that, and I thought, wait a second, to hit me on this cheek, you'd have to hit me with the left hand, right? And I thought, is there an unusually high number of Jewish people that are left-handed? And it's not. They're 10 to 13% like the rest of the world. I did look it up. And sure enough, they're not. So then I thought, well, what does this mean? Because then if you're actually going to hit me on this hand, you would have to use the back of your hand. And this caused me to start thinking, well, what does this mean? And so my wife and I, we started researching it, and sure enough, if some of you have been in the mission field to India or the Philippines, you know that the left hand is used for other business, right? If you go to a country, if you go to a little type of a store and there's no toilet paper, be careful of people's left hand, right? If you go to an Indian restaurant and their left hand is in the water, bringing you the water, you might not want to drink it. So a Jew would never take this hand and hit somebody. So it was a backhand slap. And really what this was, so this is much more context than people kind of look at these things that Jesus brought up in two different ways. Either one, you're going to, you hit me, I'm going to deck you. And it's not eye for eye, for tooth, it's all out. That's one response. The second response was, turn my other cheek, you can just keep hitting me because I'm a doormat, I'm a Christian, right? And I won't stand up for my rights. But that's not really what Jesus was showing. Now, I would say that there are cases when, you just have to take it as a Christian and be the better person. But there's an interesting twist here in these three examples that Jesus gives that shows us an outsmarting. And that's what I really wanted to emphasize. So in this case, if the backhanded slap was a real sign of I am superior, you are inferior, like the Romans to the Jews to the Gentiles, whatever the parents to children, this kind of a thing. The backhanded slap meant you are nobody, is really what it meant. You're nobody, you're nothing. And so when Jesus says, turn the other cheek, so if the person backhand slaps me here and I turn the other cheek, what do they have to do if they want to hit me again? They have to now hit me this side, and because that is onward, that means you're treating me like an equal. And so in the culture of the day, what he was doing was turn the other cheek and make them treat you as an equal. And then they would probably pause and think about what they were doing, because what you were elevating your own human dignity in the eyes of God and saying, don't treat me like an animal, treat me like a human. This is very empowering to the people of that day to take this into their own hands and say, you can hit me again, but I want you to do it as though we're equals. So it's very interesting that Jesus was teaching them to, and I want to say that all of these things to me are very redemptive. In the world today, Christians are being persecuted. Armenia, Nigeria, probably some other places that are maybe less prominent right now. But a day may come in this country when those who want to stand for God are going to be persecuted. And do we just lay down and say, go ahead, treat me however you want? Or are some of you prepared to say, well, actually, I'm a U.S. citizen and I know my constitutional rights? Is that appropriate to bring up your constitutional rights as a Christian? It is. And that's what Paul said in the New Testament, right? He said, I'm a Roman citizen. You can't do that to me. He pulled that card on them because he knew that he could get to Caesar and try to witness in Rome if he pulled that card. So we need to know these things. Christians need to be smart. It's not black or white, revenge or just be revenged upon or be taken advantage of, but cause people to think about what they're doing. They will be startled and they'll have to contemplate, and maybe the Holy Spirit can flash light into their mind and cause them to think. So you would have to come across and hit the person. So this is very interesting, and I had never heard this before as a Christian, to use the cultural context of this, and actually Jesus was saying, stand up for your rights. Now this maybe is a little comical, but it's supposed to teach a lesson here. The second illustration Jesus gives is if a man sues you for your tunic, which was the shirt, give him your cloak as well. And what was the point of saying that? Was he really just saying, be a victim, have your victim mentality, nothing goes right for you, everything goes wrong, and just give them all your clothes. Or go the extra mile with them. No, what he was really saying was, do you really want to take all my clothes and make me stand naked here in public? And so what does that really say? Are you that oppressive that you will rob me of the shirt off my back? We have that saying today, right? Take the shirt off his back. You sued him for so much money, or whatever the case might be. And so really, again, you're startling the person and saying, are you really that cruel? And of course, if there's onlookers, they're going to wonder, wow, is he really that cruel? Now, in the Old Testament, there was actually a law that if you were indebted to somebody, they could take your cloak, your outer cloak. But because the people were so poor, that was also his blanket for nighttime. And so the rich man had to return to him his cloak before nightfall because he could sleep in it. And then the next morning, he could come and pick it up again. But he wasn't to go into the man's house. The man was to come out voluntarily and say, okay, here's my cloak. I'll go try to make the money I owe you. Bring my cloak back tonight, please, because it's supposed to be 53. You see? So here what Jesus is saying, though, is reveal oppression, reveal greed. Don't let them get away with it. It's not violent, it's outsmarting the evil. And lastly was Jesus said, if someone wants you to carry their burden a mile, go with them 2. Now, there was no actual Roman law that said that. Some people suggest that if you said go 2, then the soldier was breaking Roman law because they only could make someone carry their burden for 1 mile. But there was a law when a Roman soldier, they could go to you and they could take your ox in your cart and they could use it for 1,000 paces, and then they would have to return your property. But I think what Jesus really saying is, again, people are going to treat you like an animal. That's really, and we know Jesus actually tested the disciples, didn't he? When the woman came to be healed and he said, this is not for the dogs. And the woman said, but even the dogs get crumbs from the master's table. She humbled herself to the point of a dog to be blessed. But what Jesus was saying is, if people treat you like an animal, go the 2nd mile. And that was against the law for a Roman soldier to use their ox and their cart for more than 1 mile, 1,000 paces. So he was again saying, don't let them treat you like an animal. Make sure that they recognize what they're doing. I'm sure today, a number of you could feel like, I think if I brought up paying taxes, you could say, yeah, that's not fair. But what do you do about it? You pay your taxes, right? And we obey civil law here. But that's really what Jesus was teaching. Now, as I think about going into the future or circumstances that can come into our lives today, do we have the wisdom to outsmart evil? I don't. But there's a promise in the Bible in James chapter 1, verse 5. God tells me, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally. Do you want the Holy Spirit? Do you want wisdom? Do you want to shine and be a blessing to people? You can ask God. And used for right purposes, he will grant you amazing wisdom and abilities. Upbraideth not. Upbraideth means he doesn't tease you. If Jesus writes a check, you can take it to the bank. It doesn't bounce, ever. What a wonderful promise. I've been claiming this promise ever since I became a Christian because I just feel my lack of knowledge and wisdom. I am so dependent on Jesus. And then in Matthew, Also, Jesus, thinking about the times of persecution for Christians, Jesus said, "But when they deliver you, take no thought how or what you will speak, for it will be given to you in the same hour when you speak." I thought about this. I like to prepare ahead of time. And I thought, well, if I end up in the Murphy courthouse or over here in the Blue Ridge courthouse, what am I going to do? I'm going to start preparing something now and I'll memorize it so that I can be efficient and effective when I'm standing in front of my accusers. Jesus says, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't make preparation like that, because then you'll shut me out. Everything needs to be, I know the promises, but you need to be fluid in your mind so the Holy Spirit can come and use you to touch people in a way that you never would have been able to do it for yourself. What a precious promise, isn't it? Evangelism right to the end. Then I thought to myself, did Jesus practice these three principles of turning the cheek, of the second mile? And I thought to myself, actually, he was blindfolded. He didn't know which cheek to turn because they were going to come at him. Hi, Sarah Lynn. And so when you really think about it, he just got beat up. He stood there and took it for us. So he wasn't able, and in the Psalms, I believe it might be Psalm 27, where Jesus, the prophecy, he says, "I am a worm and not a man, despised." And I think about that as he stood there for us, taking what we deserve, that we can have what he deserved. Did he go the second mile? He couldn't get very far at all. He would have, but he fell down under the weight of that cross that they wanted him to bear after hours of lack of sleep and the whippings that he got. That was another restriction on people. Did you know that they could only be whipped 40 times in the Old Testament? There was a limit to how many times you could whip somebody, 40. And then the Jews made it 39 just so they would never go over 40. They were very careful about that. But so Jesus, he went more than the second mile, didn't he? He went all the way to the cross for us. And lastly, was he divested of his clothing? Yes, he was. This shows that he has a cloth on him, but historically, if you were on the cross, you were naked. You were in your birthday suit. And so Jesus took all of these things to the ultimate lengths of love for us. So, I pray that we will approach evildoers, those that want to take advantage of us in whatever way it is, by outsmarting them, by asking God for help and the Holy Spirit to guide us, so that in what we do, in standing up for our rights, it's redemptive in nature. We cause them to see themselves as a result of our kindness. I think about that. Speak kind words to your adversary. It'll be like heaping coals of fire upon his head, right? And in this, and a lot of people ask me, why didn't God just destroy the devil when he sinned in heaven? Why go through thousands of years of pain and suffering? Because he had to outsmart him. The angels would not have known what was taking place had God just evaporated Lucifer. They would have all started to serve God from fear. So we had to let this play out for thousands of years so that in the end, Jesus can say, that was a bad plan, wasn't it? And and every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And it's over. What a blessing. I pray that we will all find ourselves there. And until we're there, I pray that we can outsmart evil with good and love.